Hello, this is the Truth Seeker 333 coming at you with another vid on Strong's Concordance of the title L. In our last video, we left off at Exodus chapter 34, verse 6. And in this video, we are picking up at chapter 34, verse 14. In verse 14, there are two occurrences of L. So in the first part of the verse, in verse 14a, first of all, it reads, "For thou shalt worship no other God." The entire verse reads, "For the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God." Now, the first part of the verse, which is in reference to no other God, transliteration is Le'el Acher. Here's the Hebrew. Le'el Acher. And remember, I stated that the prefix le can be to or unto, and so I've translated it here as to another God. Other God words in this verse, we see the tetragrammaton, Yud He Vav He. The translation of L in this case, in this first part, is God with a lower g. So, a foreign God. I've grouped this under the grouping Le'el. And in the second part of this verse, we read, "For the Lord," that is Adonai, Yud He Vav He, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. The title is El Kana. And here's the Hebrew. El Kana. It's translated a jealous God, but it could just as easily be translated as a God of jealous, or a God of jealous, but in the English we translate a jealous God. And again, the tetragrammaton in this verse is reference to Elkanah. So two things to note in this verse. The first thing is that the title El in the first part of this verse is in reference to the lowercase God, or the foreign God, the lower g, the lowercase g, other God. And in the second part of the verse, El is used in reference to the Israelite God, uppercase G, El Kana, or a jealous God. Now, the second thing to note in this verse is that who is El Kana? The Lord. Because in the verse it states, "For thou shalt worship no other God, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God." And there's a third thing that I'd like to point out in reference to this, where it says, "whose name is jealous," because we also see that the Lord's name is Yud He Vav He, and then in this verse we see that his name is jealous. So the Lord has many names. or rather characteristics, or we could say that this is in reference to his nature, the character of God, the many aspects of the Lord. And excuse me here, I just hit the page down button or something. Okay, we'll get back on track. So we're at Exodus chapter 34, verse 14b. Moving on to the next book, Numbers, chapter 12, verse 13. The scripture reads in the King James Version, "And Moses cried unto the Lord, saying, Heal her now, O God, I beseech thee." And I wanted to include the entire phraseology here, so the transliteration is El Na Rafa Nala. And the Hebrew here is here El Na Rafa Nala. Okay. And also you could translate this, God, please heal her, please. And you'll note the pleading nature in the sentence structure, noting that this is a crying out of desperation because of the repetition of the word please, and so also in this verse we see the tetragrammaton, which is Yud He Vav He. El in this verse is listed alone. There is no prefix to this, and there's no compound to the title here, except for the fact that the verse very clearly states that Moses cried unto Yud He Vav He, God, please heal her, please. In other words, who is God? Yud He Vav He. So my comment here that I put here, Moses cried unto Yud He Vav He, and he said, God, please heal her, so that we can see El is God and is in reference to Yud He Vav He. So in this verse, El is still just considered a title and not the name of God. And again, this is the context of Moses praying for his sister Miriam. And in the next occurrence is Numbers chapter 16, verse 22. And it states, "And they fell upon their faces and said, O God, the God of the spirits of all flesh, shall one man sin, and wilt thou be wroth with all the congregation?" And again, this is another one of those that I wanted to capture the entire phrase, O God, the God of the spirits of all flesh. And so the transliteration is El Elohei Haruchot Lechol Basar. And so this is the Hebrew here. El Elohei Haruchot Lechol Basar. And the translation, God, God of the spirits of all flesh. Now, Remember when we see this compound Elohei, the last time I believe we saw it with the occurrence of Elohei Yisrael. And I talked a little bit about how I think that has a lot to do with a nation's God, or like that it's showing the possessive of a nation having a God, the God of Israel, Elohei Yisrael. And in this case, we see that this is Elohei Lachol Basar, God of all the spirit. Well, Haruchot Lachol Basar, God of the spirits of all flesh. In other words, of all the spirits, this is the God of all the spirits, and so there's this sort of a possessiveness being linked to this God. This is the God of the spirits of all flesh. So we see that same compound again, which I'm still kind of looking at as trying to figure it out. But in most translations, they're translating it God twice in a row. El is translated God, Elohei is translated God. Now, obviously, they're not the same title, they're not the same word, and you're not going to see that in the English translation. But if you look at it in the Hebrew, very clearly we can see El, Elohei, and then Haruchot, which is the spirits, and Lachol, which is of all, or to all, or unto all, Basar, excuse me, of flesh. So, or all flesh. Lachol Bahar, of all flesh. So, the compound, of course, is Elohei, and the translation of El is of the uppercase G, in reference to the God of Israel. And my comment is basically, notice the use of El Elohei, which draws a distinction to Elohei. So clearly, at this point in the Hebrew language, El is not just a shortened form of Elohim or Eloah, if indeed it is a shortened form at all. So that gets into the conjecture or the speculation that El is actually the shortened form of Elohim. Now, that very well could be the case, and I sort of lean in that direction, because that is the title of God in the very first book of the Torah. And so it makes sense that the very first title is referenced by the shortened title El, especially in the usage of names in the book of Genesis. Now, what I'm saying here is that at this point in the Hebrew language, it could be that at this point in the language, if indeed it is a shortened form of El, or was a shortened form of El, it's being used with another word which seems to clearly indicate its relation to the word Elohim, which is Elohei. Okay, and so they're using both of them together. El, Elohei, and so clearly there is a distinction between El and Elohei at this point in the language, if we are saying that L went through some development phase and then it began to be used in a different way. We don't know. But what I am saying is that at this point in its usage, there is a distinction. And so we'll move on here. So in Numbers chapter 23, verse 8, it reads, "How shall I curse whom God has not cursed? Or how shall I defy whom the Lord hath not defied?" And the context here is of the prophet Balaam, Balaam speaking to Balak, the king of Moab. And so the transliteration of whom God hath not cursed is lo kabo el. And the Hebrew here, lo meaning not, and kabo, cursed, and then el, God. So not cursed of God, basically. And again, we do see the tetragrammaton in this verse, Yud He Vav He. The use of L is by itself, and so in the grouping I have put it as the grouping L. And my note and comment on this is note again the parallel usage of L and Yud He Vav He, showing that L is in reference to Yud He Vav He. So, if we were to transliterate this with Hebrew names, we should say, "How shall I curse whom L hath not cursed? Or how shall I defy whom Yud He Vav He hath not defied?" And so you see this parallel. It's like one sentence and then another sentence, or I should say one phrasing and then another phrasing, which is stating the same thing. It's Hebrew parallelism, where you say the same thing twice, but you say it a little bit differently. So in the first part of it, he says, "How shall I curse whom L hath not cursed? Or how shall I defy whom the Lord hath not defied?" So setting L and Yud He Vav He as synonymous to one another. So in Numbers, we see here the usage that Balaam uses throughout Numbers 23, and so we have 3 more occurrences of Balaam using the title L. In verse 19 in chapter 23 of Numbers, it states, "God is not a man that he should lie, neither the Son of Man that he should repent. Hath he said, and shall he not do it? Or hath he spoken, and shall he not make it good?" So the phrase, "God is not a man," is lo ish el. In other words, lo meaning not, ish man, and el God. So not a man is God, something to that effect. Translation, he is not a man, God, or something like that. And so this is in reference to God in the uppercase, G. The comment I have on this verse is that note that in 2 verses prior, in Numbers chapter 23, verse 17, the text refers to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, stating, what hath Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh spoken? In other words, here, I shouldn't even put the word the there, because a lot of, when you read the Lord in translations, the is is put in there for the sake of the English. What it really reads is just, what hath Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh spoken. It doesn't say, what hath the Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh spoken. In the English, we translate, what hath the Lord spoken. But literally, it's, drop the, and it's just, what hath Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh spoken. So again, this reference of El is to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. So let me check my timing on this again. Let's see here. Okay, so let's go on to the next verse. Numbers chapter 23, verse 23 reads, surely there is no enchantment against Jacob. Oh wait, I skipped a verse. Numbers 23, verse 22 states, God brought them out of Egypt. He hath, as it were, the strength of an unicorn. Okay. I think I covered this in another video, but if not, I mean, you can see this translation and explained in other videos, which this is most likely referring to a rhinoceros, which is translated unicorn. So aside from that, the phrase, the first part of the phrase, God brought them out of Egypt, the transliteration is El Motziam Memitzraim. Okay, and here's the Hebrew. El Motziam Memitzraim. So El is God, and then brought them out of Egypt. Okay, or from Egypt. The Me is from, or I guess in this case of, but Mitzrayim is of course Egypt. And so my comment on this verse is, note that the same chapter which the Tetragrammaton Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is used throughout this chapter. So we see that in Numbers chapter 23, verse 26, the phrase, all that Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh speaketh. Okay, so basically El continues to be in reference to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Okay. Now, Numbers 23:23. It states, surely there is no enchantment against Jacob, neither is there any divination against Israel. According to this time, it shall be said of Jacob and of Israel, what hath God wrought? And that phrase is pronounced Mapa'el El, or Mapa'al El. And here it is here in Hebrew, Mapa'al El. What God has done. Okay. My comment is the same as above. This chapter speaks of Yud He Vav He, so El continues to be in reference to Yud He Vav He. And so Numbers 24, verse 8, we see the same phrase again. God brought, well, this is a little bit different because it says God brought him forth out of Egypt. He has, as it were, the strength of a unicorn. Again, it's like a repeating of that which was stated prior. And again, it's this is a little bit different. I have here the same transliteration. I need to fix that. This is actually El Motzio. So let me just fix that there. El Motzio. El Motzio. Let me just double check that there. Look at the Hebrew. El Motzio. Okay. Memitzraim. And this should be translated, God brought him. Again, this is personifying the nation of Israel as a single entity, whereas above it's talking about them as a whole. So it's stating God brought them out of Egypt. But when it's discussing Jacob, then it says God brought him, that is Jacob, out of Egypt. And so El is in reference to, Yud He Vav He in this chapter. And then we see in Numbers 24, verse 4, it reads, He hath said, which heard the words of God, which saw the vision of the Almighty, falling into a trance, but having his eyes open. So the phrase, the words of God, is pronounced Imrei El. And this is tied together with this little hyphen here. Again, we'll be getting to that. Other words we have in here is we have Almighty, which is Shaddai, which is another word for the Lord, for God. You'll note that it's just Shaddai by itself. It's not El Shaddai. And we see that a lot. We see that a lot, that Shaddai is used by itself without the El prefix. So I think that's significant as well. And I'll have to think about that. So my comment here is also used in this verse is the title Shaddai. So the words of the phrase, quote unquote, words of El, is in reference to Shaddai, because we're seeing this parallelism again. Or actually, no, what we see is which saw the vision of the Almighty. So it's actually clarifying, which heard the words of God, which saw the vision of the Almighty. Well, actually, no, that is sort of a parallelism, because, in other words, the prophet is stating that he heard the words of God, and then he's saying he saw the vision of the Almighty. So it's the same thing, in essence. So again, we see that parallelism, and we see that the usage of the Almighty or Shaddai is synonymous with the title El here. And let me see how far we've gone here. Oh, we have reached our 30-minute marking. So with that, I'm going to end this video. I'm going to say keep seeking truth, and I look forward to the next video and covering these occurrences of the title El within the scriptures. So God bless, and keep seeking truth.